This story happened to my wife's sister 1 year ago. They're uber religious, and the state of her mental stability, on top of a finger found plus a police follow-up, makes the story 100% true and searchable. For the sake of privacy, I'm changing names. I don't want whoever was involved to become aware. Last July, my sister-in-law, Jackie, was going to head back to Boise, Idaho to visit for the weekend. Her husband lives in Provo and is going to law school there as he just graduated from a BYU chapter somewhere in southern Idaho. I'm not from Idaho and I'm not Mormon, so I don't remember where it's located, but Google it. Anyways, Jackie decided to drive from Provo, Utah, and head up to BYU to say hello to her friends just before coming back to Boise. The route she was on was I-15, which forks off into I-84 up to Boise. After you pass through Salt Lake City, the route becomes lost in a plain rolling flat of miscellaneous desert, dotted by farmland here and there. Jackie left Provo, Utah in the evening as she planned on making dinner for her husband before her departure. She ended up leaving around 11 p.m. and, given the late time, she decided to forego visiting her friends at the BYU chapter and heading along I-84 to come straight to Boise. She was in between Tremonton, Utah and Burley, Idaho, in the literal middle of fucking nowhere, when she drove up to what looked like a body lying in the road. The location is so desolate there are no radio channels, cell service, go fucking figure, or lights to be seen for hours. This 24-year-old girl was in the middle of the desert, in a shitty green Dodge car that already had enough problems, so it's a miracle she made it home to us without issue to begin with. She arrived at my wife's parents' house, but that was just the beginning of the story, really. Here is her account of what led up to this event. At 2 a.m., she said she saw something lying on the road in the distance. As she came closer, she could see it was a body in the road, lifeless, in the middle of nowhere. It stretched across both lanes and she could not simply pass without running it over. Cautiously, she came to a stop and made sure she parked about 15 yards away and stopped. She opened her door and yelled, "Are you alright?" But no response could be heard. With the car lights broadcasting brightly on the body in the road, she got out of her car and walked slowly toward the person. As she got about 10 feet from the body in the road, she could see it was a dummy, fully dressed in human clothes, just lying there. Terrified, she sprinted back to her car, slammed the door, and sped over the dummy. We received a cell phone call from her around Mountain Home, Idaho, about 45 minutes away from Boise. She was shaken and terribly scared, claiming she could hear footsteps chasing her to her car before she got in and drove off. We wrote it off as a freak accident. We were all asleep and sounded too bizarre to be anything of worry. As she pulled into the subdivision, she called us once again to help her unload the car, and to probably console her, given the bizarre experience. I opened the garage door and stood in the driveway with my wife, waiting for her to pull in. She came racing into the driveway and jumped out of the car. This is where I fucking lost it. She opened the car door, and a finger fell out. She had not stopped and drove straight to us after she came across the dummy. The person who had placed the dummy there had chased her back to her car, and as she had slammed the car door and sped off, the person had reached out, losing a finger in the slammed door. We immediately called the police in the area she said she stopped at. The cops did a survey of all hospitals in the area for a man with a missing finger, and they found an exact match of the description. He was still in the hospital as he was arrested. The police did not give any details into the man's past or who he was, just simply told us not to worry, he's been arrested. I'm sure it's an anticlimactic ending to a terrifying scenario, but I will never forget the feeling that came over me when that finger fell out of the car door. This happened 2 nights ago, so I'm still replaying it over and over in my head. I thought this would be a good place to share. I'm a pretty predictable person with a predictable schedule, so I'm not sure if this is a random occurrence or if someone knew my nightly routine. I'm a 35-year-old woman. My husband Rob gets up for work hours before me, so he goes to bed before I do. I usually get to bed a few hours after he does, around the same time every night. I turn off the lights and the TV in the living room and take my dog to the back door to let her out. She's tiny, old, and possesses zero threat to anyone. The door leads to a large deck outside. Off to the right of the deck is a few steps down and a small path to the gate, which we always keep chained and locked. Every single night before opening the door, I peek out of the window right next to it without disturbing the blinds, and flip on the deck light. I never expect anyone to be there, and we've never had a problem with anyone trespassing or trying to break in. It's just something I do, every night. Kinda like peeking behind the shower curtain before I pee. I know no one's back there, but if I don't check, that's going to be the one time that there actually is someone hiding there, you know? Hey, I watch a ton of horror movies, and it's pitch black outside at night where I live. So a few nights ago, I got ready for bed, went to the back door with my dog slowly following behind me, and peeked out the window. I flipped on the light. My heart jumped into my throat when I saw a skinny, dirty guy in his 30s, 40s, standing off to the side of the door, facing it. I see him raise up his arm and hold a screwdriver above his head as soon as the light went on, preparing for someone to open the door. I screamed, "Rob, get up! Get the gun!" as loud as I could, which startled the guy, and he jumped over the rail of the deck, even though he's right next to the stairs, and ran. My husband ran out of our bedroom with his gun. He called the police and they showed up within 5 minutes. They drove around trying to find the guy, but no luck. The guy broke the lock on our gate to get in. He also pried open the back screen door, which we always keep locked as well. If I would have opened the door without looking out first, I might be dead. I don't know if I caught the guy trying to break in, or if he was waiting for me to open the door like I do every night. Either way, it was fucking terrifying. My parents are buying us outdoor security cameras this week as an early birthday present for Rob. Amanda is my brother's girlfriend. At the time of this story, she was looking for her first apartment and moving out from her parents' house. Her and my brother didn't want to move in together since they'd only dated for a few months. She opted instead to search for a roommate online. Browsing Craigslist, she found an ad titled something like "Roommate Wanted, Females Only." This sort of thing was common since the area she was looking in was mostly young professionals. The listing was for a room in a house for about $225 a month, which was quite cheap compared to the most places listed. The occupant listed herself as a 23-year-old college student that wasn't comfortable living with any males. The other roommate would have their own room and attached bathroom. So far, Amanda was into this place. However, the listing only had a single photo from the outside of the property. Amanda sent an email wanting to meet the occupant and tour the house. Within 30 minutes, she receives an email back with all the details and time to stop by. The girl worked late hours and wanted Amanda to stop by at 8 p.m. When Amanda arrives, there's a handwritten note on the front door saying, "Door broken, use back door." Walking around the house, it looks nice but slightly unkempt. Tall grass, weeds, dusty windows, etc. Still no alarms for Amanda though. When she knocks on the back door, an older man opens the door. At first, Amanda thinks she has the wrong house, but the man reassures her and says that the occupant, I forget the name, was out and he was the landlord. The occupant asked him to meet Amanda since she was working late. He seemed pleasant and offered to show her around. Alarms start going off but aren't at red alert yet. First, the guy was clearly in his 40s, unshaven, and looked like he lived in his car. Also, only the kitchen light was on. As they walked around the house, Amanda noticed one huge red flag. No furniture, nothing. The landlord was polite about answering questions, but seemed irritable to keeping lights on for too long, rushing her around and only letting her look at rooms for a few moments. There was a single room that the landlord wouldn't open, telling her that it was the occupant's room and he didn't want to invade her privacy. As they walk down the hallway into the living room, she notices the front door has a plank nailed across it. Broken, for sure. Amanda's creepometer is starting to ding, so she decides to wrap up the walkthrough and leave, but trying to be polite. As she's giving the guy her "thanks for the showing" bit, he perks up and states that he forgot to show her the basement. It's recently furnished and would be a great rec room, and she could take a look down there. At the time, Amanda and the landlord are standing in the small hallway between the front living room and the back kitchen. In this little hallway was the basement door. When he opens the door, it opens outward to create something of a barrier between Amanda and the back door. The basement is pitch black. He smiles, motions down the stairs, and says, "Ladies first." What happens next is nothing more than a stroke of luck. Amanda gets a text just as some random person parks in front of the house. Thinking on her feet, she pretends it's a phone call and answers her phone. "Hey, yeah, are you here? I'll come out from around the back and let you in. Yeah, it's great, you have to see it." With a motion of confidence, she excuses herself from the landlord and walks out of the back door. She says the guy just looked at her like he was confused. Once outside, she sprinted to her car and sped like hell out of there. When Amanda got home, she told her mother and my brother everything. Cops were called, they took her statement, and went to investigate. The Craigslist post had been removed. The house had been foreclosed over 6 months earlier, and the property had been abandoned. When the police investigated, they found that the closed room the landlord didn't want her to look in was where the man had been staying. There was a pile of old dirty blankets, rotten food, and empty gallon jugs everywhere. More creepy, he had plastered ripped-up pages from porno mags on all the walls in the room. The really scary part of this was the basement. The man had tied a thin piece of fishing twine at about shin level across the stairs about halfway down. The basement was empty except another pile of old blankets, a broom handle wrapped in leather belts, and a small box with a few rolls of assorted tape. Amanda ended up not moving in. I grew up on the countryside, right next to a national park frequently visited by nature lovers and bird enthusiasts. It was the kind of park where you're not really allowed to ride bikes or ride horses, only walk or run, but 10-year-old me felt it was a stupid rule and did so anyway, because the trails were perfect for it. I knew fully well that I wasn't supposed to do that, and was caught a few times, but nothing much came of it apart from a half-hearted "don't do it again." And I did, of course, until one day something frightening happened that made me stop. My family were horse breeders, and I would often take one of the horses for a ride, usually in the Forbidden Park. This day, very early morning, the first day of the summer holiday, it was beautiful outdoors, misty and foggy, yet a sky that promised a sunny day ahead. Since it was so early, before 6 o'clock, I knew there wouldn't be anyone on the trail to see me, so I let the horse set off full speed along the trail. I only slowed down on the part of the trail that got steep on one side, leading down to the river, because the thought of one step so close to the edge was too much, even for a kid with next to non-existing risk assessment skills. Suddenly, the horse came to a halt and refused to take another step. I grew up with horses all my life and knew that usually indicates that you need to investigate. Is there something in the hoofs? Did the horse spot something that spooked it? The hoofs were fine, but the horse didn't move an inch. That's when I saw it. Someone had set up a trap. A thin, sharp metal wire across the trail, in perfect neck height for an adult. I stopped and looked around, but didn't see anyone. The wire was well attached to 2 trees, and impossible for me to remove, so I led the horse around it, and to do so I had to walk up a bit into the wooded area on the side of the trail. That's when I heard the singing. There's this song called Hey Tom Gubar, and it was that melody. But the lyrics were different and sung in a muffled, sniggering voice. Today I only remember parts of it, but translated it would have been something like, "Hey, all you runners, come here passing, let the lifeblood pour out." I, as silently as I could, with my heart in my throat, backed away, got up on the horse, and hurried back the way I came as fast as I could. I knew I had to tell someone about it, but at the same time I wanted to avoid admitting to riding a huge and very forbidden horse on these protected trails, so now I had a problem. The old stories came about a mad old man living in the shed in the woods, a shed that was once a cottage for the local hunter, came back to me as I hung on the horse for dear life. I got home and told my older brother what had happened, and he went back there with me in tow. We found the wire trap, and after a while of searching, we also found a spear-like pole in the ground, right on the spot where you'd land if you came running and jumped over the fallen tree on the trail. That's when we called the police. The area was searched and several similar traps found, but no sight of the old man. The following summer, though, there were big news in the local paper about spear-like poles being found right under the water surface, directly under that little tower you're supposed to dive from at the lake. And black garage bags filled with big rocks were found on the narrow bridge crossing the river, so that if a car had hit it, risk is, it would have gone off the road and into the water. So maybe about a year ago, I was living with my parents off in rural woods. There were houses around, like walking distance, but this kind of community wasn't the type to introduce themselves whenever someone moved in. Hell, in the maybe 8 years I lived there, I'd never met a single one of my neighbors. Everyone keeps to themselves. In my parents' house, when you open the door, you immediately have to walk up or down a set of stairs to get to a level. We never used the downstairs except for the laundry and access to the garage, but if you did go down there, there were windows that allowed light in, and you could see maybe 2 feet up from the ground, like a slightly covered basement. On the second floor, we have a living room that has double doors to an outdoor porch, and my mom and brother's room are at the opposite side of the house, him living across the hall from me. So I usually stay up pretty late, till maybe 2 or 3 before I'm tired. So one night it's maybe 2:30 and I'm just starting to power down and shut off the lights and get ready for bed. I'm laying there trying to fall asleep when I hear screaming, like someone getting murdered screaming, and I can tell whatever it is, it's really close to my window, if not directly underneath it. I'm so scared I freeze up and can't move, never mind look out my window or call for help. It doesn't go on long, maybe 2 minutes, but I can't move for the rest of the night. The next morning I'm up and just trying to tell myself it was some horrible nightmare I imagined. I talked to my brother about it later in the day and he looks incredibly upset. He goes outside and looks around our yard and just comes back in and tells me there's nothing there and no signs of anything having happened. I can't stop talking about it though, and he tells me I probably just heard a fox crying, or, while rare, it's possible a mountain lion came through, or worst case scenario, I just heard an animal being eaten. Again, we live in the woods. The closest store is 35 minutes away, but people seek this lifestyle, so there are houses within a half-mile. So it's not impossible that something, not someone, was attacked. So anyway, after a few more sleepless nights, I blow it off and try to forget about it. Honestly, I think this is only the second time I've even told anyone about it. Fast forward maybe 3 months, still sleeping in the same room and still awake till late. Only difference is, now it's dead of winter, like 0 degrees, 3 feet of snow winter. I'm still completely awake, so I know what happened I could not have made up. The faucet for the outside hose turned on, but it was turned full force. We don't have a hose attached to the pipe, so it literally just shoots water like a fire hydrant. Again, I'm a wimp. I shrink under my covers and pretend not to hear it. I know where the knife is next to my bed, and that's enough comfort to get me to sleep somewhat. The next morning, the hose isn't on. I talk to my brother about it and he checks it out and tells me I must have been dreaming. Again, there's no sign of anything outside. The next night I swear it happened again, but this time I manage to lift a corner of my curtain and I see the water is on. Next morning my brother goes out and says the pipe must have busted from the temperatures or something, so we just have to shut the water off the faucet until the spring, and we leave it at that. Fast forward to 2 months ago, a little less than a year since the first incident. I moved out of the house and my brother's moved out of the state, and my parents have moved out of state as well. I'm visiting my brother and we're joking and reminiscing, and somehow we stumble onto the mountain lion cry story, and he jokes how crazy I was to go out in the middle of the night and look for it. I stare at him. I never went outside. I was too scared. He continues to laugh and tells me how he saw my footprints outside under my window. He tells his friends I must have balls of steel to hear that cry and actually go outside. I'm now uncomfortable, but I don't bother trying to tell him it wasn't me. He wouldn't believe me. Where my parents' house was an extremely small town, even though everyone lives so far away from each other. Like, everyone knows your name as well as your middle name, who you lost it to, and probably even your blood type. So that is to say, anything that happens, news will spread like wildfire to everyone. So 2 days ago, my friend is talking to me over Facebook about some local who got arrested for suspicious activity. Apparently, for the last year or two, he's been sneaking around at night, turning on people's water hoses, trying to lure them outside to turn them back off, and then he would kill them or whatever he did. He would live in the house of the dead/missing person for a bit until bills piled up, and then disappear to a new house. Now, I know small towns can gossip and exaggerate, so I'm not assuming that this has anything to do with my weird stories. Honestly, I can't let those thoughts even creep into my mind because I can't sleep as it is. But I can't stop replaying those memories and wondering if this guy was just standing under my window the entire time, waiting for me to look out or come outside, or what the hell that scream was.